Hey, Miriam, you're on mute.
Maybe you're on your.
How's it going?
It's great. We're having a great time. Ellen's here too.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, I was on this morning. Well, I was on some of the time. I need a share too. We're like two old people. They have these two. Wait, Bill, it's too dark.
I know, you have to get, because the light's behind us. We have
Oh,
to
so
turn-
turn a little bit. We have these two chairs that are, I don't know what, can you pull one for me?
Yeah.
You know, like these kind of things. So, anyway, we're sitting in them with like a stool between us, like two old people in their bumpy grandpa chairs, watching TV. Well, anyway, what's happening in Sharon? You say the roads are kind of slippery?
No, today was warm, so it was good. Yeah, everything
Yeah.
melted, so it's good.
Yeah, but then if it freezes overnight, I find that's the worst.
Yeah. So yeah, we're good. We're good. So what are you doing? What's on for tomorrow?
Hiking.
Tomorrow we're coming back so that I can, get to stay, yeah. And then going back and forth, it's a little bit much.
There's more people.
Hey, Tova.
It's the way it is, yeah. Uh-oh, I missed my clicker. So anyway, that was nice, Miriam, twice in one day that you're getting on classes. Good for you.
Just turned out that one day. You too.
I know I couldn't get the whole thing this morning though. Like I said, we had this museum pass. And so, I mean, a museum reservation. We went to the Clark again. It's very nice. Yeah. So it's good. Yeah, we had some snow up here. Didn't you guys have rain today?
No.
You didn't?
Okay. Yesterday we did.
Oh,
Today.
all right. And how's Mitch?
He's good. Doing
Which is
dishes.
good.
He's doing dishes.
Good, he
Doing
should.
dishes.
Tell him to
Oh,
do more. That's
yeah.
excellent, excellent.
Yeah, I gotta turn this.
I'm gonna go on mute and we're gonna cut off the video so we can.
Slate the way it is.
So Miriam, you're gonna be getting a double portion of hopefully. So,
I'll
if
hold
you
on to
did,
it for you.
all right, if you want to eat it, you can eat it, but otherwise, good.
Okay. I'm going to turn off my thing because other people are on.
Yeah, I am too. I
Yeah,
am
there's a
too.
lot of people.
All right,
that go.
guys.
We'll see you.
Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. I don't see any silly hats this morning at the Parsha Shir. Someone surprised us with a nice silly hat, but maybe someone can take one out to get us into the Purim spirit a bit. I might have something in my closet. Hold on a minute. All right. There we go. A little Purim cheer never hurts. All right, Josh has got a hat. Thank you, Sarah. All right, thank you, Beth. It's good to have some community spirit here. We're not going to be able to see each other, or at least all of us at one time in Shul, so this might be an opportunity, coupled with our photo costume competition, which is taking place over Purim as well. Okay, I see Janie and Esther getting into the Purim spirit. The pressure is on for everybody else, but no judgment. But keep your cameras on, even if you don't have a silly hat. Okay, it's good to see everyone. I'm excited to learn together with you. I'm gonna share the source sheet in the chat. And also going to share screen so that we can follow along together, or you can follow at your own pace by clicking on the source sheet. I always prefer seeing the faces over the text. However, I know it's helpful sometimes to see the text in front of us on the computer. So I'm going to share the screen here. Okay. And on your screen viewing options, I'm sure you've played around with it by now, but you can do a split screen so that you can see half the screen, the source sheet, and half the screen, other faces, which is up to you how you want to divide it. The proportion is your choice. But if you do the split screen, sometimes the text of the source sheet can get a little small. That's the only trade-off. Okay, so hopefully the source sheet came through in the chat. I see some people chatting. Okay, I see on the chat that some people are having a hard time hearing me. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Okay, it looks like the majority of people can. So Esther, maybe try playing around with your Zoom a bit, and hopefully the issue will resolve itself. You never know, like whose end it's on. It's sort of part of the mystery of Zoom. But we're gonna keep going on, and hopefully you can work it out, Esther. Okay. So for this evening, we are going to tackle the topic of why did Esther mask her identity? And every year I turn to the Megillah for new insight and new inspiration. And as much as things have changed in the year that has passed, that hasn't changed. We can still look at our narratives, our texts, and glean from them relevant wisdom for our lives. And so as we approach Purim, there's a little bit of a somber mood because I am thinking about the last time that we gathered together as a collective group with 450 people in our sanctuary, playing with a sort of or approaching the fire code limit like we do every year, and with all of the fun, the festivities, and the frivolities of the costumes, most of which are appropriate, but some, of course, are borderline. And last year, we put on our Purim masks, and who knew that we wouldn't take those masks off for a full year. And so we're still wearing our masks, and that's a heavy thought. But as I said a moment ago, we still can turn to Megillat Esther for an uplift and for a boost. And hopefully this week we can experience some of the lift that Purim has to offer. So the question that I want to study together with you this evening is about Esther hiding her self, her masked identity. As you can see from the picture here, she has no face. She has the crown, but she is identityless. So envision with me for a moment the scene in Haggai's office. All right, Haggai is the man in charge of the beauty competition for the next queen. Many beautiful women are coming to register their names to be candidates to be the queen. Esther, or Hadassah, walks into the office, and the secretary hands her a clipboard and a yellow piece of paper, an intake form, and says on the intake form, it says age, email address, cell phone, Twitter account, emergency contacts, and nationality. Esther leaves the last question blank. She hands in the form, and a few minutes later, she hears over the loudspeaker, "Is there a Hadassah sitting in the waiting room?" "Yes, ma'am, that is me." "Oh, hi, sweetie. Don't you look charming? It looks like you forgot to fill out part of your form." "No, I didn't, ma'am. I meant to leave it out. Well, didn't you see that there was a star, a red star next to that question, that it was mandatory? Well, I'm not going to fill it out, even if I'm disqualified. Okay, sweetie, it's your risk. I'll have to ask the boss if you can proceed. The secretary texts Haggai about this refusal, and he says, just text me a picture of her. He gets the picture, texts back, she looks pretty enough. Pass her on to the next round. Even if we don't know who she is, we don't really know her story. I'm busy, let's let it slide. We'll deal with it later. That's the scene as it unfolds in Haggai's office. And Haggai actually has not just, he doesn't just give her a free pass, he actually gives her some special treatment and gives her some extra perfumes and cosmetics. He takes a liking to this young Esther. But Esther remains resolute in not revealing who she is, her identity. I'm going to pick on some people for some reading, as I like to make this a participatory sport, not just a passive endeavor. So let's see, Amy, could I ask you to read the first pasuk here? It's in source number 2.
Sure. Lo higida Esther et ama vet moladata ki Mordechai tiva aleha asher lo tagid.
Thank you. So here is the first instance in which the Megillah reveals to us that Esther will not tell or reveal who she is, both her ama and her moladata, both her national identity and her birthplace. And what's the reason why she will not do so?
Mordechai told her not to.
Yeah, okay, we can end the shiur right now. The reason is explicit. It's right in the verse itself. What's Esther's motivation for not sharing her true self? Mordechai, whether it's her uncle, father, husband, whatever path we take there, told her not to. And she's a good girl. She listens to her family. Case closed. Okay. So then the question would at least shift to, why did Mordechai tell her not to reveal this secret? Why did he impress upon her to seal her lips? Okay, so we still have the question. Moving along to the next instance in which we see this refusal manifest. Okay, let's see. The next one on my screen is Rachel Levine. Would you be willing to read this next pasuk for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ein Esther mageret moladata et ama kasher tziva aleha Mordechai et ma'amar Mordechai Esther asa kasher haita ve'amna ito.
Okay, wonderful. So here we see, very similarly to the first instance, we see that Esther doesn't share her ama and her moladata. Okay, here it's reversed. We also see the reason she's not doing it is because Mordechai told her. But we see one key difference between this text that Rachel just read for us and what Amy read for us. What is that crucial difference? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the, yeah, who is that?
It was Amy.
Yeah. I couldn't hear.
The last part of the pasuk, right.
Okay. So that is a difference, but I'm focusing on the first part.
Reversal in the listing of ama and moladata.
Okay, so that is a difference. I'm not making significance out of that. There seems to be
maybe higida or magedet.
Oh, good. We got our Israeli Aaron to notice the difference in verbs. So what's the difference, Aaron, between those two conjugations of lo higida and
past.
ein mageret.
Past and present,
Okay,
I think.
good.
All right.
Yeah, you passed the test. So lo higida means that it happened once, that she didn't tell in the past who she was. This was the scene as I tried to describe it in detail happening in Haggai's office, right? That she refused once. However, in the next scene, we have Ein Ester Mageret, that Esther is continuously not telling in the present about who she is. Now, that signals to Chazal that Esther is resisting, a lot of pressure from Achashverosh, because at this time, the two of them are already together, and the king is nudging her. Just tell me your origin story. I'm so curious to know. Don't be worried, honey. I already chose you. You have nothing to be afraid of. Just tell me who you are. What sports team do you cheer for? Where's your birthplace? I want to know more about you. So that shift in the verb tense is significant, going from past to present, because the hoveh indicates that this is an ongoing issue for Esther throughout the Megillah, that she continuously holds out and does not share who she is. The Chazal that I referenced just a moment ago about the continuous attempts that Achashverosh makes to have his wife reveal her identity can be found in source number 4. So I'll read this. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hadassah Shma, her name was Hadassah, Velama Nikret Shma Esther. And so why did she get this second name of Esther? Al Shem Shahaita Misateret Devareha, because she would hide her matters. Shne Amar Ein Esther Mageret et Ama. She would not reveal or tell who she was. So the essence of Esther is about this concealment, this hiddenness. And what's the primary thing which she conceals? Her identity. And when does she conceal it? She conceals it perpetually. As the Gemara continues to tell us, Vayas Hamelach Mishte Gadol, the king made a great feast. Avad Mishtaya Velo Gal Yaleh. He made her these great feasts so that she would reveal to him who she was, and it did not work. Dali Karga Velo Gal Yaleh. He lowered the income tax rate, and everyone was so happy because he named the new tax bill the Ester tax overhaul. And even with all that positive publicity that she got, he could not convince her to tell her who she really was. And finally, Shadar Pardishne Velo Galyale. He sent gifts to people throughout the aristocracy, throughout the Persian leadership, from Esther's name to again try to win favor in her eyes, to give her positive PR. And he thought this would win her over, to give her the incentive to reveal to him who she was. And it came up empty. So we see from the way that Chazal understood Esther's identity and her ongoing behavior that her reluctance, or refusal, I should say, to reveal her identity is very significant. And here I want to just frame the question before we launch into some approaches to resolve it. What was Esther thinking in refusing to share her Jewish status? Whether we call that her moledet, her nationality, her religion, her ethnicity, did she not know that identity or that national identity mattered a great deal in those times? The Megillah opens noting that there were 127 different provinces, different nations under Achashverosh's rule. And the Megillah itself, at the very end of the first parak, underscores the significance of people's identities. Source number 5, after the debacle with Vashti, we see that letters are sent out, or scrolls are sent out. Vayishlach Sfarim al kol medinot hamelach el medina ubina kichtava. Every different land, every different nation, ve'el am ve'am kilshono. Each group of people according to their own language. Lihiot kol ish sarer beito. That a man should rule his household. Definitely a provocative mandate that we will put in the parking lot and take out another time. But the part I want to focus on is that this pasuk signals to us that Medina and Amimut and Lashon really matters in this time period. It's not just an optional box you can fill out when you were opening up a bank account, right? This was a really big deal to the kingdom and to the palace of Achashverosh, and Esther somehow got away with not revealing it to anybody. So what was motivating Esther? Why was she hiding this? Was it really worth risking her chances at becoming queen to not reveal this? That is the question. And I am curious to hear your thoughts and would like to unshare for a few minutes to receive your suggestions about this quandary, about why Esther is not revealing her true self. Janie, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, so my first question is, how do we know she actually wanted to be queen? Or was it something that Mordechai told her to do and she was just following all of his instructions to her? You know, was there something going on in the realm that he wanted her to be queen for, and she didn't understand or know why, but she just listened to him?
So it's possible to cast her as a passive sort of pawn up into a certain point, right? Because she does assume some agency at various intervals in the narrative. But indeed, we could pass the buck here and say, why are we pressuring Esther to explain her motivation for hiding her identity? Ultimately, it's her uncle, father, brother Mordechai, or husband Mordechai, who was calling the shots, certainly at the beginning of the narrative, right? So we could pivot and say, what's driving Mordechai? Okay, so that's a fair pivot, but the question then still needs to be answered, right? Whether it is upon Esther or Mordechai, it is still a significant question. Other ideas, suggestions? Don't be bashful. I'm wearing a funny hat here. Come on.
So I have something that just occurred to me, and maybe it's because of sort of current events that this seems maybe resonates. Whether it was Esther or Mordechai who had some sort of a nevuah that we needed to have someone in that role, and that Esther was going to be queen. I'm wondering how much of the reason for not revealing her identity had to do with Chilul Hashem. I mean, Achashverosh was not a very, it was not a ethical monarchy. He was misogynistic. He was a lot of wealth inequity. I mean, nothing about it was good, and yet she was his queen. You know, it was hard enough for the Jews in any event, but to be sort of aligned with something so malignant. Maybe Mordechai and Esther realized maybe it's not such a good thing for the Jews to be associated with someone like Achashverosh, up until the point where we actually need to be. And when that time came, obviously she was in the right position, but probably not a good thing to be identified as part of such a malignant authoritarian rulership. All politics aside.
Of course. But I like the proposed suggestion, Josh, about this being part of a nevuah that Mordechai somehow realized that there was a need to have someone in place. And we're going to come back to that towards the end. But more specifically, your point was that Mordechai and Esther didn't want to be guilty by association with this barbaric and amoral at best king.
Well, this is Bill, you know, there's like an immediate precedent to her behavior, right? Was Vashti. She was banished based upon her personality, right? She refused an order. And so Esther assumed a blank slate, and Achashverosh would have no basis for taking any action. You know, Vashti was a prime example, and so Esther and Mordechai looked at that and said, we're not going to give any cause for anything to happen, and Esther will be simply neutral. And Achashverosh had nothing to react against.
Right. Great point. Right. Vashti was a real firebrand. She was rebellious, and she had connections to the Babylonian rulership, and she had strings attached. And so there was a lot of, unsettling there was an unsettling unfolding where Achashverosh had to eliminate her when she threatened him. But even if Mordechai and Esther wanted to create a blank slate, once Achashverosh persisted to ask Esther about her identity, you would think that she would give in sooner because of the track record of Vashti, who refused her husband and was eliminated. Would not Esther be fearful of her life in the same way that Vashti was when she did not obey her husband's request? So that, I think, position only goes to a certain point. But at some point, it turns on itself.
I have another possibility, as is Mitch. At this point, it was between the first Beit HaMikdash and the second Beit HaMikdash. So the Jews had been defeated. I don't know, maybe the thought was either from Mordechai or from Esther, the Jews are such a lowly people that if she did reveal that she was Jewish, maybe there would be no way that she would be chosen as queen.
Great. So that is one of the approaches that we're going to take, as we'll soon see that Rashi, Baruch Shekivanta, says that exact approach, that the status of the Jewish people was a lowly status at the time. And if Achashverosh had found out about Esther belonging to this exiled, dispersed class, it would have been a deal breaker. So that's, I think, an approach. And we have a few other compelling ones that are in the air as well. Any others before we start taking a look at the Mefarshim? Yeah, Esther.
Yeah. Could it be that Mordechai knew what Haman was thinking about the Jews? So he wanted to have someone in the palace there to influence the king and help the Jews?
So one of the important pieces that we have to keep in mind is Haman is not yet in the picture.
Yeah, but he was there.
So we don't know
Maybe
what
Mordechai knew him.
Yeah, so we can speculate that it perhaps, Haman had some kind of political party that was causing trouble for the Jews, and Mordechai saw that on the horizon. But from what we know in the chronology of the Megillah, Haman doesn't arrive on the scene until much later, long after Esther and Mordechai are refusing to reveal their identity. So while it is possible that there is some anti-Semitic fear, it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't seem to be credible at this point from what we know from the Megillah itself. Okay, Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, we know it's between the two temples, and we know that the Jews have wanted to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, and it may be, even with Haman aside, that Mordechai was thinking towards the future and wanting to have some influence in the court so that they would look favorably on the Jews going back to Jerusalem and rebuilding the temple. So he wanted Esther to be in the court, inside, and that might be an influence. And he advised her not to say who she was. I think it made her more intriguing, here's a woman of some mystery. And that would make her actually more appealing to the king and more likely for him to want her because she had some mystery surrounding her.
Okay, so it was intriguing to this king to have someone who he didn't know much about and had the challenge of trying to peel away the layers of the onion to get to her core, right? So that's perhaps a strategy that distinguished Esther from all of the thousands of other, contestants in this rather grotesque beauty pageant. Okay, let's take a look at the Mefarshim, and we're going to unearth 5 different approaches to this question. I'm going to share screen again, and hopefully you can also access the source sheet on the chat where it was shared. Okay. So the first approach, we'll just quickly see it inside as Mitch really articulated it outside, is from Rashi in source number 6. Where Rashi says, Asher lo tagid, why didn't she reveal it? Kedeshi yamru shehi mishpacha bezuya v'yishlucha. Because if she filled out that she was Jewish on that, what color was it? Yellow intake form, then she would have been thrown out of the office and disqualified right away. She'im yidu shehi mishpachat Shaul hamelach hayu machzikim ba. I don't actually understand this latter part of Rashi, that if they knew that Esther was from the family of Shaul, if she was known to be a descendant, then they would have kept her. That seems to be going in the opposite direction. That if she had revealed her royal lineage, then it would have been an asset as opposed to a liability. So, but maybe it could have been a threat as well. I'm sort of thinking out loud. in the same way that Vashti came from royalty, if it was known that Esther came from royalty as well, maybe they would, they machzikim ba, meaning they would hold that against her. And so that's the second reason.
I understood it a little bit differently.
Yeah, go ahead.
אשר, can I? אשר לא תגיד כדי שיאמרו שהיא ממשפחה בזויה וישלחוה. So she didn't say because... Oh, can I? If she said that she's from a family, not a respected family, then they will send her. And she will not have to be with the king that is Achashverosh and bad one. But because had they known that she was from the king's family, they would have taken her and keep her. So the idea was that she will not be taken. They didn't want her. They wanted her to be sent away.
So this was Esther's attempt to disqualify herself.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Because if she had revealed who she was, then perhaps she would have become a lead candidate because of her elevated lineage.
Yes, yes. And she's hiding it because she's showing as if she's ashamed of her background family. So they will let her go.
Now that you say it that way, I think you're correct to read Rashi in that way. So it's still a motivation for not, revealing who she was, but it has more to do with how to stay away from the kingdom than it does about trying to get ahead.
Yes.
In the kingdom. So now that I'm reading it a second or third time, perhaps this is a different approach than what Mitch was sharing about the fear of being rejected right away, because that assumes that she didn't want to reveal it because it would be a disqualifier, whereas here she wanted to reveal that in order to disqualify herself, but didn't reveal her connection to Shaul in order that she not be advanced.
There's a proof from the text, as it says, "Vatilakach Esther Beit HaMelech." It wasn't her choice; she was taken.
That's right.
Bidyuk. The Gemara says exactly that point, that she was forced.
This also
go ahead, Josh.
Furthers the point that this furthers the point that it was Esther who was the Neviah. In fact, it was Mordechai wanted her not to. It's also Rashi is saying Mordechai's motivation for telling her not to reveal herself was so that she wouldn't be taken. So once she was already taken, there was no reason why she couldn't at that point. If that was the reason, once she was already there, there's no reason for her not to say, I'm from this family of Shaul, or I'm a Jew. It doesn't make a difference. It was then that it was really Esther who realized, even now that she was taken, that there's still a strong motivation not to reveal her identity, whether it's because of how she had a nevuah that she was going to be needed at some future point, or whether the issue of Chilul Hashem. But this really makes it sound like, at least initially, Mordechai was operating in the dark. He actually wanted her not to be taken. He had no idea that having her in that place would be valuable at some point.
Right. It definitely changes the players in this drama if we understand that this was not revealing was an attempt to disqualify at first, but it backfired, and then Esther, for some reason, which we still don't know, held on to that tactic even when it was no longer a liability. And that's still, I think, something we have to answer. Although, why didn't Esther reveal? Why did she hold that card, close to her chest? And maybe, Josh, what you're saying about her being a nivuah has a lot to do with it. Okay, so this is great. We have already 2 or 3 approaches from the first source. I want to move to the midrashic interpretation of Esther's concealment, which has to do with her lineage and her descending from a long line of people who knew how to stay quiet for a greater cause. And that does tie into what you were just saying, Josh, about Esther sort of knowing that there was a reason intuitively for her to stay quiet, even if she didn't fully understand what the greater purpose was. So here in source number 7, the Midrash connects Esther and her refusal to share her nationality to her ancestors. I'll read this inside and translate. Ein Esther mageret moladata milamed shetafsa shtika ba'atzma, which teaches us that she was able to grab onto this silence, just like Kirachel zekanta shetafsa pelach shtika amdu kol gdolei zar'a b'shtika. Rachel tafsa pelach b'shtika ra'a sivloteha biyad achota v'shatka. Right. So, what episode is this alluding to? When was Rachel quiet in a way that was remarkably gracious?
When Lavan gave Leah to Yaakov instead of herself.
Exactly, and she even gave over some of the secret, codes that had been established between Yaakov and Rachel. She gave those over to Leah, and she remained quiet at that. And that was a very powerful silence that she had, which was a selfless silence. All right. And Esther inherited those spiritual genes from her matriarch, right? Because we know that Mordechai was an Ish Yemini, right? Which meant that he was descendant of Binyamin, which meant that Esther, who was a blood relative somehow of Mordechai, was also a descendant of Rachel. And the next person is Binyamin. The Midrash continues, Tafas b'shtika, Teda she'avno shehaita b'choshen haita yashfak alomar yodahia b'mechirat Yosef v'shotek. All right. So he also knew about the sale of Yosef, but was quiet in order for the entire narrative to unfold in the way that it should have. And also Shaul has a moment as well. When Shmuel comes to him and tells him that he is going to be the first king, and he doesn't say anything about it to any of his family, even after they pressure him. I just brought the pasuk. This was the source 8 was about Binyamin. And source 9 from Shmuel is about when when Shaul's uncle says, "What did Shmuel just say to you?" And Shaul says back to his uncle, "He just told us that the donkeys had been found." And then the narrator says that Shaul did not say anything about the fact that Shmuel had just told Shaul that he was going to be king. So we see that 3 of Esther's ancestors were very good at maintaining silence for in a very selfless way for a greater cause, for a greater narrative to unfold without sort of subverting it at an early inflection point. Okay, so I think this is sort of a second approach for to at least explain why Esther did not reveal her identity, it's because this was her this was what she was made of. In her bones and in her soul, she had this capacity to just stay quiet for some grander reason. And why didn't Achashverosh care? Why did this not cause him to do what he did to Vashti? Just the pasuk from Mishlei says that the second half says, "Ve'alkol psha'im techaseh ahava," that love covers up all faults. If he was in love with her, then she could do no wrong. Right? The passions conquer all, all rationality. And so, yes, perhaps it frustrated him. Perhaps he really wanted to know. Perhaps he was always intrigued by the mystery of not knowing, but he loved her, and that's what mattered most. Okay, so we have already a few approaches to this, and I want to just share 2 or 3 more to round us out and then to conclude. Okay, so the next approach, which is by the Netziv, is that Esther had to make herself completely neutral in order to fully adopt the persona of queen. And where do we see this? In Perek Hey, at the very beginning, in source number 11, Vayhi bayom hashlishi batilbash Esther malchut bata'amor b'chatzar beit hamelech hapnimit. So Esther, as she was preparing to approach the king, batilbash Esther malchut, she wore the kingdom. And Chazal here wonder, how come it doesn't say malbush malchut? And the answer is because she subsumed her personality and her identity into the role of being the queen. And here I'll confess that Sarah and I watch a show called The Crown. It's rare that we get to have time that is aligned, but when we do, it's our go-to show. And one of the repeating themes of that show, which is about the English royalty, is that everyone in the royal family needs to self-sacrifice for the sake of the crown. There are many scenes in which Margaret, the sister of the queen, or Princess Diana, they have to cast aside all of their, friends, all of their interests, in order to subsume themselves into the crown. And so this could be a strategy of Esther, as was mentioned earlier, that she wanted to have a blank slate going into this so that she could play the role of the queen fully, full throttle ahead without any strings attached, because that would make her the best queen for her husband. She didn't have any baggage. She didn't have any reservations. She was fully bought into her role and her responsibility as the Queen of Persia. So that could be another approach to why Esther stayed so quiet about who she was. Finally, I want to return back to where Josh and a few others have been alluding to in terms of Esther playing a role of a prophetess who was directing a narrative that was in which she was a messenger of Hashem. So there are a few sort of mefarshim that underscore this approach, and I'll first share in the name of the Ibn Ezra, who in source number 12 says, Yesh omrim ki Mordechai lo asa nechona shetziva al Ester shelo tagid ama ki pachad shelo yikachena hamelech leisha im yeda shehu mehagola. So that's actually getting to Mitch's point about some say that Mordechai was wrong to tell Esther not to tell Achashverosh about her identity, because he was afraid that he would reject her because she was from the Gola. Okay, so that's the first point that Ibn Ezra makes. The Acherim Omrim, and others say, Ki bederach nivu'ah o bechalom yada shetavo teshua al yada Yisrael. She knew in her heart that she was going to be part of the salvation of the Jewish people. It was going to happen through her, but she didn't know how. So she kept this as a pathway on which it could happen. And Chazal themselves list Esther as one of the 7 prophetesses. In source number 13, they give us the list of Sarah, Miriam, Devorah, Hannah, Abigail, Huldah, and Esther. And then the Gemara proceeds to give a proof text for all of the instances in which these women prophesize. But they are challenged when they get to Esther. When does Esther prophesize? There is no time that she talks to Hashem. Hashem is absent from the Megillah. So when is it that we know that she has this special Ruach HaKodesh? It is specifically in her not revealing of her identity. The final source that we'll see in, or the second to last source that we'll see from in source 14, the Gemara says, Esther dichti vayhi biyom hashlishi. So how do we know that Esther was a prophetess? Because it says in the pasuk, which we just read above, Vatilbash Esther malchut bigdei malchut, Vatilbash Esther malchut, that she got dressed with the kingdom. Bigdei malchut mi bayalei. It should have said with the clothing of the kingdom. Ella shilav shata ruach hakodesh. So what is it that she really was wearing? She was wearing the spirit, the divine spirit. That is what was possessing her at that moment, as she was wearing the royal garment and not revealing who she was. That was part of her, that is the moment when Chazal saw her prophecy come into action. So it's quite significant that the specific example of Esther being a prophetess is about her hiding of her identity and replacing it with the identity of the queen. And the reason for that is because she knew that she would need to play this card at the right time. She would need to make the big reveal about her being a Jew at a critical juncture in order to save her people. But she didn't know when that would be. And so she persisted in refusing to tell Achashverosh who she was until the time came when the plot that Haman devised against the Jews was actionable. And that's when she played the card. And so Esther not revealing who she was, she did not even fully realize why or what was possessing her not to do that. So what was the motivation? It was an inner intuition, a Ruach HaKodesh that she had, which possessed her to remain silent in the face of all this pressure to reveal who she was. So we've seen several different approaches for the question that we started with about why did Esther mask her identity. And in conclusion, I'm going to share one technical halacha about the folding of the Megillah that connects. The Shulchan Aruch writes in the laws of Kriyat HaMegillah that there is a custom, and you'll notice this if you pay attention to the Baal Koreh on Thursday night, that the Baal Koreh is meant to fold the Megillah into sections and then read from it. Instead of having two rolled up sections, one on each side, like we do for a Sefer Torah, the Baal Koreh actually takes 2 or 3 columns and folds it over, and then folds it over again and folds it over again. So he unrolls the entire Megillah, folds it, and then makes the bracha. Why does he do that? Or why does she do that? You'll see the same thing in Tfilat Nashim. So the reason for it, according to the Shulchan Aruch, is in source number 15 here. Minhag kol Yisrael shehakoreh koreh uposhta ki igeret. It's meant to be folded over like a letter. Laharot hanes, in order to publicize the miracle. What miracle, what nes is being publicized in the Megillah? So I taught this halacha this afternoon between Mincha and Mariv, and Rabbi Goldfeder afterwards came over to me and said that there is no one nes in the Megillah. The entire narrative is chock full of small, subtle miracles that have to do with timing or conversations that were had or not had, or in our case, a perpetual silence or refusal to reveal something, which is part of the nes that is on the list of nisim that make up the entire Megillah. And so by folding over the Megillah in this unusual way, we reveal that the entire thing, the entire narrative from beginning to end, is one long nes. And I hope that tonight we have uncovered just one of those nisim that lurks sort of beneath the surface of the entire narrative, which is about Esther's refusal to reveal her identity. And it's not just a coincidence, it's not just a detail that is insignificant, it is a critical component of the unfolding of this narrative in such a way that Esther becomes a prophetess or actualizes her capacity for Ruach HaKodesh by not revealing who she was. So I hope this gives us a new lens, a new angle through which to appreciate the Megillah this year. And I'd be happy to listen to any more insights or questions before we say Laila Tov and Purim Sameach. Any further insights or comments?
So, like, just one thought. I love the concept of this, explanation as to why Esther's a Neviah. But there also seems to be a real, like, kind of partnership between her and Mordecai and the unfolding of everything, right? Like it's not, I don't think it was just her intuition or her Ruach HaKodesh alone that brought her to that point. It's really, it was like the prodding of both of them, you know, the famous classic. I have a sticky notes of like some favorite psukim on my desk. Here is one of them, which is Umiyodea im le'et kazod higat lemalchut, right? So Mordecai says, like, maybe, you know, this is the reason why you became queen. So it seems like it really wasn't just her soul intuition, but it was really an interplay between the two of them, and they're working together to help unfold all of this.
Indeed, it was a partnership from the very beginning. And the fact that Mordecai told her not to reveal her identity stresses or emphasizes that point. He was, did he understand why not to do that? Maybe, maybe not, right? But he was also a Navi of some sort, because his insistence really was critical for Esther staying quiet when she needed to, in order to have this at her disposal when she needed it most. Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Okay, well, if there are no further comments, it was a wonderful opportunity to delve into the Megillah. Every year, I love being surprised by the new insights and new angles that we can learn together. And I hope this helped us get in the right mindset for Purim. And I'll wish everyone a Chag Purim Sameach.
Purim
Thank
Sameach.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach.